Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz, and this is an exciting time of year, mid-end of January, which of course is a big part of the buying season for the wedding segment of the event industry, so a lot going on for a lot of us, and I myself have been very busy. I've been doing a lot of interviews. I'll tell you in a moment who I'm going to interview soon in New York. And then I'm going to San Francisco. But I and my team have been working for months on a new website for my own music and entertainment company. I think many of you know I have one. I'm just so excited. Just released it. Would love for you all to check it out. It's KushnerEntertainment.com. And I have a very different take on it. I produced, managed, and developed some tremendous acts, some great bands and other acts. And that's a given. It's more about how we create this experience, how my team works ahead of time with my clients and also party planners and designers and venue contacts to learn about the client, learn about the vision of the planner, and create this incredible experience connecting with the crowd. It's just so much more than just hiring a great band. So again, if you could check Kushner Entertainment, you could read more about it there. Also, getting ready to go to New York City in about a week and a half or so. I'm going to be interviewing for a second time two people, Colin Cowie, and also going to interview David Stark. And I'm very excited about that. Both of them were just incredible interviews for me. So much to it. I'm really psyched to go for a second time. And I'm going to have a few other interviews that I'm setting up. And then a little later going to San Francisco, where I'm going to do a very interesting different interview, which I'll tell you about later, and hoping to fill a slot or two with some others. So a lot of trips coming up. So I want to mention last week's episode, if you missed it. It was with Julie Novak, CEO and founder of Party Slate, the photo-rich website where leading event professionals share their work, build their brand, and drive leads. And Julie and I had a great conversation, including a topic that has not really come up that much on the show as much. We went into depth about raising venture capital to expand and scale. And Julie knows a whole lot about it, gives us some great tips and also some other topics as well. So to introduce this morning's guest, it is actually a second interview. We'll call it part 2 with none other than Lynn Easton, who created Easton Destination Events, a luxury destination wedding design and planning company that works worldwide with offices in Charlottesville, where I saw her again, and also Charleston, South Carolina. She is also the creative force and co-founder of Easton Porter Group, a luxury hospitality company with a portfolio of award-winning boutique hotels, vineyards, restaurants, and event venues in North America and Europe. Lynn is a very popular planner and designer among the industry as well, because so many of us have heard her speak. She shares more in this morning's interview on her perspective about branding yourself and choosing a partner team for your events and her approach to that, and also shares some of her secrets for creating a high-touch event, which she is so known for, and the details. And so we have also a fascinating conversation about pricing that you definitely don't want to miss. And we re-released her first interview December 31st. So that's a great one. Listen to, you might want to hear that before this one. And don't forget to listen to our follow-on segment, which we are now releasing on Wednesdays, and that's The Next Level. And that's in which myself and a guest co-host, who this time happens to be Sean Lowe of The Business of Being Creative, another very popular guest that I've had. So Sean and I tease out some of the highlights of the interview with Lynn and help to kind of deliver tips and tactics for you to raise your business to the next level. And again, we are now releasing The Next Level on Wednesday mornings because we want to give you a chance to first listen to the regular one. So be sure to look out for that. And now my conversation with Lynn Easton. So Lynn, it is so good to be back here on one of your properties, Pippin Hill. I love it here.
Happy to have you back.
Yeah, I feel like I was just here, but it was something like over a year ago.
I know.
My God. Well, here we are, just finishing out 2018. I heard that you designed, planned one of the biggest weddings that anyone has had like this past year. I would love to hear all about it.
I would love to tell you all about it, but we have an NDA on it.
No,
so
non-disclosure for those who don't know.
We are totally under wraps, but it was for a wonderful client. It really was one of the most fun, most joyous, hardest event we've ever done.
Can you tell me why it was the hardest?
Just logistically, anytime when you're doing these really large events, the installs are hard.
Yeah.
The logistics of working with all these vendors are hard. So it was complicated.
How long did you spend on this?
Oh, we booked them a year out, and we had a great time.
Listen, it's just us. No one's listening. No, it's just us. It's just a microphone. All right. Shoot. Well, one thing I wanted to come back to, because thinking about the last time we spoke, we talked a lot about branding. And I remember that you were talking about how branding is super important when it comes to your own business. And I believe you even said our luxury comes from a saturation of details and a sense of understatement. And, how do you express this to other people and branding your event? And, we covered a lot of ground. We didn't go too in depth with it. And I'd like to know more about how you feel about that. I know that was a game changer for you.
Well, and it's interesting because we were talking before we went online that I just came back from Morocco, which was a fabulous trip, which we did with some wonderful industry friends. And while we were there, we did a couple of roundtables. And one of the things that was interesting is that we touched on this whole branding, and the group turned and said, well, Lynn's sort of the queen of branding. And part of what I said to the group is that one of the differentiating things about Easton to most other elite or nationally recognized event planning companies is that I think almost all of them are coming out of major metropolitan areas. So the breadth of clients that they have,
they're right there, geographic.
You can have the preppy bride, you can have the dazzling bride, you can have the rock star bride. And for us coming out of very much, Easton Events was born in Charlottesville, Virginia, and there are 50,000 people living here. So how did we carve our way into this big, noisy world? And, I don't know that I could have done it any other way because I feel, I personally embrace my own brand, but that is really, I think, the big differentiator of why we were successful, because I intrinsically had this brand and I was able to cut into this wedding world with our brand really out front. So I say things like, we're literally not looking for every bride. We're looking for our hashtag Easton bride. And, and I did lose, I hope she's listening now because she was a wonderful bride, but we were talking about doing a wedding for her. And I did an interview with Abby Larson of Style Me Pretty.
Right,
and I said to her, we were talking about something similar to this. And I said, we're not the planner for every bride. For example, if you are a bride that really wants to bedazzle your wedding in every way, probably there is another planner that would be a better planner. And this bride heard this interview and she called the next day and said, you know what? I really want bedazzling. And, I said, well, I'm so glad you heard the interview because I really did genuinely mean that. There is the right planner for everyone. I often say to people when we get a call from somebody, I say, I would tell you your due diligence is to talk to 2 other planners. It's, you have to be, it's a little bit like going through the dating phase to find that right person that you want to go.
Yeah. And you want them to really, pick you educated, not just,
Exactly. So that's really how important we feel branding.
How would you describe your brand?
Well, I somewhat flippantly say it's expensively understated. And I do say that to our clients because it is to be understated does not make it inexpensive. In some ways, it's almost more expensive because if you think of something, if you kind of gild the lily, it's just easy to make that all gold up front. But when you're creating luxury through, these layers, it's these layers and layers, there has to be a lot of layers to create that luxury. And the more layers there are, the more expensive it is. So for example, if we're doing a beautiful piece of tabletop, that printed menu is almost as
it could be a work of art.
Exactly. It's as important. And to have beautiful, crafted, a paper suite is incredibly expensive. So it's all part of that understated elegance.
Can you give me more examples? Like I know, Lynn, that you are known for the way you deal with details. Which, like you're saying, can be so powerful. It's subtle, and there could be an emotional draw that people don't even immediately get, and it creeps up on them, or they just simply feel it. They don't even know where. And I know you with details and your high touch perspective on this. Can you give a few more examples?
Well, I think, again, like when you're looking at one of our favorite weddings was last year at Blackberry Farm. And it was basically a winter wedding. So when I think about their table, we did green velvet tablecloths. And the plates actually were the plates that are made for Blackberry. So we really intentionally wanted to use them to make it feel sort of more residential. And then there were these beautiful feather feathers that our bride, she comes from a family that hunts, and they go out and she brought in all of these feathers. So we use these feathers in the tabletop out of the napkin rings. And then the menu was tied up in sort of a brass filament. So just all of these little layers. So when you look at the table, it actually, when you kind of pull back, it was like, oh, that's pretty. And then you dive in.
There's like a story, it sounds like, behind each.
And the cutlery was horn from Small Masterpiece. And I don't know if you ever know Small Masterpiece, but they're a wonderful company. And they come in and it's very Downton Abbey-esque. They come in and they've got all of these beautiful tabletop things, but then they'll come in and they measure everything absolutely perfectly. And so you get this wonderful rhythm in your tables because everything is absolutely perfectly measured. So that's the kind of thing I really appreciate in it. And when he comes in to do this, he basically requires about almost 4 hours to set the tables. And you have to build that into your timeline. That's hard on the day when the room has to be cleared and he has to do his thing. So, but that's something I really appreciate. So those details and I think that is our signature. I think people know that when they're looking for an Easton event, we say that I never want any event to ever look the same. And we really try to actually encourage, I don't want to say push, but we really encourage our brides. There was that huge phase of everybody wanted green and white. And we were like, there's so much breadth out there. There's so many wonderful places that we can go. And we really have pushed our brides to, embrace color and pattern and depth and layers. And it's not there isn't a place for the fabulous green and white wedding, but, we really love to curate our events so that each bride, when we get a bride, we're obviously doing our due diligence to understand what it is that she wants. And then we go and pick the right team for her. So that's one of the reasons why I think all of our events look fairly different.
You don't necessarily use the same people.
No, I mean, in fact, we, and I hate to say this, but we almost try not to. And we probably have about 10 photographers that we love. But even in the same year, sometimes we'll wind up with 3 being shot by the same. And I would honestly almost intentionally not try to do a 4th because even the photography gives diversity in terms of our portfolio.
Yeah. And I imagine for you to figure out, okay, for this particular wedding, I'm going to have Jose Villa, for example. I know you spoke about
my
that
dear
last
friend,
time.
yes.
Yeah, he was on
him.
the show too.
Yeah, love him.
Got to listen to that interview. It was great. But yeah, it's interesting to me it's such a creative act to be able to get a sense of somebody and a couple and their story, and then to think to yourself, okay, all these wonderful photographers, but for this particular one, this particular person, that must be a part of what you really enjoy.
Absolutely. And it's not just their creative talent, it's also their personality. Because again, I mean, you've got somebody who it's such on the wedding day, I think particularly for the guys, I mean, I think I would say that most of our brides, most of them like being photographed, although we have some that don't, but the guys generally don't love the moment.
Right.
So just finding that right fit of the photographer. We've got brides who want to be sure that the second photographer, is a woman, because when they're getting into their dress, they don't want a man around. So it is just, finding that right fit, both artistically and then emotionally. I think is important.
That's a really good point. Because, I learned from all the photographers I've interviewed, each of them does have a very distinct, not just style visually, but the way they work with the client. Heard some amazing stories. I just didn't think about that.
No.
You're also matching up who is going to make the most comfortable so that they can get what they need.
Right. Their personal style. And we've got brides who are, they want this photographer because they've shot these celebrities. And it is interesting just, what encourages brides in different directions.
So you're doing a lot of education too along the way.
Absolutely. And that's really for all of our vendors, not our photographers, our videographers, our floral partner. And so we're working on a wedding now. We're working with Mindy Rice as a floral designer.
She was on the show. She's great.
And she's wonderful, isn't she? And then Jackson Durham, who are out of Dallas and Atlanta, and they're basically going to be our production company. And I knew this family is fabulous. They're so fun. They're so young. Both the parents are, young. And we literally curated a team that we knew was going to be great fun for them because, our parents are going to spend a lot of money over the year. And I think it should just be a blast to get there. So we were all out in Dallas together and just, and had a wonderful time. And we were going in one direction and it felt a little safe. And they said, no, let's make it a little more interesting. And all of us we're smiling from ear to ear.
That. Yeah.
Absolutely. So we're curating every single, I think it's interesting. In the old days, we used to call everybody vendors. And
please call us those. or something.
Partners or create.
Please.
Exactly. Because, they are so much more than, in quotes, vendors. I often, and I say this to my, to all of our clients, and I say it with a smile on my face, everybody thinks that the client's the really important one, but the reality is it's really the vendors and the creatives that are really important to Easton. And that's because when we go and do an event, if I have every creative bringing their A game to that event, ultimately that's what's going to make a successful event or wedding for our client. And we really honor our creatives. This sounds terrible, but and I'm going to say it, you see the brides and then you might, you maybe never see them again. I live with these creatives. I mean, I work with all of our photographers, all of our floral people over and over and over again. And I want them to always know that they can trust me, that I'm going to take care of them to our very best ability. But I do think it's one of the reasons why we have had the success we have is because we are really able to produce these, seamless events because we have this great teamwork with our...
You suggest, do you have any other ideas?
Right, 100%. I mean, I see our role as the executive producer of our events, and I believe you hire the best creatives that you can have, and then you have to listen to them because that's what it would be foolish to hire somebody and then not listen to them, to hire somebody else the next time. So we are really, and we have, we've been doing this a long time. So we have, very long-standing relationships of hiring people who I know on the fly. Yeah. Okay, this has just gone down and everything's got to be turned on its head. And I've got to be able to look to my creative and say, okay, here's how we're going to do it.
Or even, I would say the opposite too, right? Even if it's not necessarily a challenging situation, I love if there's something going on in the room and I'll pull the planner and say, what if right now,
Right.
I love that.
I do too.
There has to be a fluidity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that really is the fun. I mean, gosh, that's
the creative.
Right, exactly. I mean, I think if people say, well, what do you love about your job? And it's the fact that absolutely every single time we go out of the gate, it's completely different than the last time. How fun is that? And then
different than what you expected going in.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is, gosh, what's better than, literally being in the business of happy? I mean, the fact that we get to be with somebody and their family on this momentous day, up to that point, probably the most important day of their life, is honestly kind of as good as it gets. So...
I just want to take a moment and say, wouldn't we all like to have more exposure in our markets? I mean, certainly our own handling of social media and various other tools are ways that we do gain more presence. Though, what if you could have professional outside help that you could depend on to really get you the results that you need? And I know we all are happy to get much more presence. Well, I want to tell you about our sponsor of today, OFD Consulting. They are an award-winning publicity agency that focuses on the wedding industry, and their client portfolio ranges from top-tier planners and venues to well-regarded national brands and industry thought leaders. And OFD Consulting has placed clients in a slew of popular online and offline publications, including the New York Times, Martha Stewart Weddings, Style Me Pretty, many others. And they also have a service that's dedicated entirely to B2B press for those looking to elevate their brand reputation among peers through online mentions, guest articles, podcasts, and speaking engagements. So if you are a small business and you want to get your name out there, get more exposure for your brand, get your message out there, and you want to just dip your toes in the PR waters, check out the OFD Collective, which is a 3-star membership with robust educational and coaching opportunities, along with ongoing press leads. So definitely check out ofdconsulting.com. Again, that's ofdconsulting.com. I also want to follow up with that, talking about creating a legacy client too. I remember at Engage, if I remember correctly, you said something. I hope I'm not revealing something you don't want the whole public to get.
God.
But no, it was a great idea. It's a great idea. It's that on Sunday morning after the weddings, you've already ordered a frame, right? And you have a photo digitally, printed, and it's waiting for them, with, what was it, Veuve Clicquot or something like that, waiting for them in the morning. I mean, who would expect that? Talk about it. High touch detail.
So what we do, just to explain that a little further. So 2 weeks before the wedding, we've already talked to our photographer. We say we need a digital. So a lot of our shooters are film, and we say you need to be sure you're getting us a digital picture that we need the next morning. Exactly. And then we've called the hotel in the Mauritius Island, and we've asked them to go buy a frame for a 5x7, and then they send us these all
and so there's a match.
So they send us like 4 different pictures of the frames that they have access to. We choose one, and then we send them the picture. And then when you arrive at your suite in the Mauritius, you have a bottle of Veuve from us with a little note and your picture of your wedding.
Like I got goosebumps.
Yeah, and it is. I must say, it is. We've had our brides are just, honestly, they're thrilled to see the picture because they've just rushed through this thing, and I know they appreciate the thought that went into getting that picture frame, by the side of their bed. So
it creates a nice romantic element to it.
Exactly
too.
right.
I'm sure people thank you for that. And taking it further, what about in terms of creating like these legacy type clients? How else do you look at that? Because I know you'll get a family and you're going to do a lot for them in their future. Do you have any techniques that you could talk about?
I don't think we do. I think that, and that's because, first of all, we're in a very rarefied world. We're only doing, we did 9 weddings last year. We'll probably do 8 weddings this year. So we really have the time we really get to know our client. And there's so much friendship and trust that goes on. So really afterwards, it's just, honestly, it's just an extension of, I wish I could say that, here's what we do. We do send all of our brides in the year. I did at Engage, I did say that, we try to do a welcoming gift when we onboard someone. That hasn't worked out as well, honestly.
What do you mean? Why?
Well, because the season is so busy and we want it to be curated for them. And so we actually have done it at Christmas time. We send all of our brides of the year just to, we feel so happy to, have you.
That's a great idea.
Happy to have you. Yeah. I mean, if you only have 8 or 10 brides, we do we do a nice gift. It literally is just we are honored to be on the journey with you. So do we do that and I will say we do not do that with any agenda for any future business.
Right.
But clearly, all of our brides, back to Morocco, one of the conversations we had was, how everybody feels about social media. And I was one of the few who was like, I love social media. And the reason why is because I love being able to keep up in touch with everyone. So there isn't one of our brides that I, from the last 10 years that I don't know that, how many kids they have, what their names are. I mean, because we're all connected on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I love that. So, and then when somebody is having a 50th birthday or 40th birthday, they're going to ring us. And so that's really no big science to how we maintain that.
Way. I like that. I also want to come back. You were starting to talk earlier about the trip recently in Marrakesh, and if you could help define for people listening what a fam trip was, but it was a great deal of, you were saying your friends, this was a very high-end group of people, I know that you all had some roundtables as well to discuss some issues in the industry and share ideas. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the topics that came up and, how you feel about them, and were there any conclusions? Was it more questions? How did that go?
So a FAM trip is basically, it's FAM is short for familiarization. And essentially now hotels are interested, they really have, they understand that weddings are big business. And that the last FAM trip that we did with David Beam about a year ago, almost before we had left, we were at the Aman in Sveti Stefan in Montenegro. And I think almost before we had left the property, a bride had called and said that she wanted to be married there. So there is good ROI for for the hotels. So essentially Morocco I think it has huge potential. I think it has significant potential for the American wedding market. Going to Europe is very expensive. Morocco is so much more affordable. There are some beautiful, beautiful properties. And I hadn't been for 20 years. So it's a whole new, it was really amazing. So basically the hotels invite us to come, and they are very generous with us and take amazing care of us and give us these wild and wonderful experiences, including one day we went out to, some of the highlights, went ballooning, one of the most beautiful mornings in this huge valley. It was so wonderful to be, in a 20-person basket, which I'd never been. I've been ballooning a lot, but not in such a big basket, as the sunrise with all of our friends. And then the next day we went out for lunch out in the desert, and they did this. So literally one experience after the next was pretty epic. So we did have the opportunity to sit down together, and Mindy Weiss was there, and David Beam, Brian Raffinelli, and Jack Ezon were the hosts of the group. Marcy Bloom was there. So, it's a wonderful, wonderful, talented group, Michelle Rago group of people. So we did sit down and we talked about just lots of different things. Going back to that branding conversation, is one of the things that came up that day was that some planners were saying, we're not trying to, basically, Lynn, you all are trying to be one thing, one set of brides. And that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to be, something for everyone. And that's when I countered with, but it's just different because you live in a town where you've got access to so many people. That was a conversation that we had, which was really interesting. We talk a lot about pricing and the whole concept of being on a percentage as opposed to being on a flat fee. And when we have a client and they say, gosh, how can you justify a percentage? And I say, because I've been doing this a really long time and I've had enough weddings that started at one scale. Right. And then all of a sudden, 3 months in, they turn and they say, you know what, here's what we want to add. We want to add this and then the next levels and then, or more days. And it's very hard to go back and say, let me reprice this. But not everybody does in our industry, even at the national level, not everybody does. So we had a lot of conversations.
Can you dig more into that in terms of how that works with a percentage? Is it literally a percentage of everything?
For us, and different people do it differently. For us, we don't include, it's everything that basically we manage, obviously, your florals, your music, your photographer, your videographer, and anything that has anything to do with decor. The one thing that we don't include is obviously nothing personal, anything that they're going to wear or anything like that. And the other thing is hotels. We don't, just because it can be such a big chunk of money that, let's say, if they're doing a buy out of a hotel and it's $400,000, even though we actually are managing it, we're not.
And maybe you're negotiating, you're doing a lot of work looking, no?
We often have somebody, a travel partner, who will negotiate it for us. Again, we know, I wouldn't say that is really what our expertise is. So we partner with somebody whose their expertise is really drilling down and being sure that our client is getting the best contract and the best value for what they want. So we just think the percentage, and at Engage in Ireland, I hosted a panel and Colin was on it, and I think Marcy and Sarah Haywood and Matthew Robbins. And it was really interesting to see how the industry is very varied. I would love to see some synergy come together about pricing. So it's really about, particularly at this sort of elite level, it really shouldn't be about pricing. It should be about who is the right fit for you. Who is the best planner? What is the scope of what they do? How would they be best for you? So interesting that I'd certainly love to see that happen. And, we did probably have 3 different sessions. Some of those things we decided as a group that not to discuss those at this time. But it was really interesting being with some, really, really, really talented industry people and to see how differently we're approaching things.
It's interesting. You come back to pricing for a minute. I remember at one of the engages, Colin was the one who spoke, and he was almost emphatic about it, speaking to the crowd, saying, we're all corroding our prices too much. People are giving away too much. Pricing is going down. You need to raise it. He was really trying to get group, and there's various levels in the Engage group, maybe not necessarily the super high elite, but that was a real passionate thing for him too, was getting people to look at pricing. Value yourself is what he was talking about. You got to value. I think people get so anxious and scared. I think it's out of fear that people will do that and dilute their price.
I very much agree with Colin on that. I do think one reason why the world of wedding planning has been, I'm really going to say this, but a little soft on pricing is because it is a female dominated in terms of the numbers industry. And I think that women have a little bit of a harder time standing up for really what their value is. And one of the speeches I gave at Engage was on what's called the confidence code. And I just, am always anxious to just speak to women about how important it is that you understand your value. And I hate to say that I'm speaking to women, but because I would want to speak to any young person, but I think there has been a little bit at play here. And it's one of the reasons why I think that the percentage works so well, because it's just, you don't have to, am I worth $10,000, $20,000, $50,000, $90,000, $120,000? I'm worth 20% of the value of what you're going to put into the event, just like architecture, just like interior designers, just like contractors. I really believe we are the only service industry that has no structure for our pricing.
And also, we're talking about being transparent too, which the client is going to appreciate, respect.
Right. So for us, what we do is our clients, it hasn't always been this way. And again, there was no one out there talking about what would be the best way to do this. So when I started, 25 years ago, gosh, I signed all the contracts for the clients. I paid everybody directly. I mean, the liability was crazy. So now we have our clients see every contract, so I say, yes, it's 20%, but it is 100% transparent. You will see every single contract. You will sign it. And I think that's just certainly a lot cleaner way to do it.
Yeah, no, I like that. And so, as we kind of get ready to wrap up, what are some of your own goals for this next year?
Well, we are really excited we just went and met with, I think I maybe told you that we have these trademark, we built this thing in a database in a system called FileMaker. And essentially in the old days when you had a timeline, you would have 12 pages of your timeline and you would hand that off to your makeup artist and they would kind of about when they were supposed to be, where and when, and they would kind of glaze over because it's 8 pages or 12 pages. So what we did is I had been working in a database. So every single line item in our timeline is coded for who needs that information. So when you pull B for bride, only the things that your bride needs, she doesn't get any extraneous information. And anything that the transportation company needs, only they get that information. And why it's so beautiful is because it's all coming out of the same well. Then a little shift to the right is that we have a portal on our website. So when we get a new Easton bride, she comes through the portal and everything that she needs to work on the wedding is there behind the portal. Anytime she wants. So all everything from her invoices to her wedding info form to, oh gosh, I need to pick my ceremony music. Well, behind the portal is the list of everything that we suggest for your ceremony music and links to YouTube. So all of our tools are there. So we're going to try to white label. So we had our first meeting and we should be getting the first of the year. We'll get back. It's very expensive to do it, really grown up expensive, but we're going to try to bring these systems to the market in 2019. Since we talked last, so we are going to do it. So that's really exciting. And then, as you know, on the Easton Porter side, because we're busily working away on that side.
And this is like boutique hotels around the world. You were up to, 11 or something?
Well, actually, no, we're only at 6, but we've got several really exciting properties, which means lots of designing ahead for me in terms of rooms and common spaces, things like that. So it's going to be an exciting, 2019 is going to be really busy.
How are you doing this?
Her name is Augusta Cole. And so she's our executive director. And she really is,
she's who helps you just stay organized and all.
She is such a powerhouse and she is there helping us move all of these fabulous events that we're going to do in 2019 along and tells me where to show up and what to do.
Yeah. What about in terms of challenging yourself for the next year? How do you feel about that? It sounds like this event you did that you can't talk about created a whole lot of challenges. I would think at this point you've seen it all.
Oh, I think that, the whole from the Easton Porter in terms of doing all of these new builds, that has a whole nother set of challenges. We got a tiger by the tail there. So,
but I get the feeling, I'm seeing you smile while you're saying it. You're embracing these challenges.
I really love it. I love how diverse my world is now. I think it's exactly where I want to be. I feel, I've worked tremendously hard. We have an amazing team. I think the quality of events that we're doing is brilliant, and that allows me to embrace this other side, which is growing the hotel and restaurant group. So super exciting. 2019 is going to be awesome.
Well, Lynn, thank you so much for being on the show again. I love to, come back every once in a while and check in with you, and this has really been great. So thank you.
Lovely to have you, Eddie. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Lynn Easton. And be sure to check out The Next Level, which comes out this Wednesday morning, in which myself and guest co-host Sean Lowe talk about the interview and help suss out some tips and advice for you to use. Also, check out Lynn's website at eastonevents.com. You can find her on social media at Easton Events. And check out the show notes of our website, theweddingbiz.com. And also, don't forget that we also have a network with Julie Sabatino of The Stylish Bride at the Wedding Biz Network. I know I'm giving you a lot of information here, folks, but there's so much good stuff. Also, if you enjoyed this, please share it with your friends and colleagues. Really helps people find us. And a great review is always wonderful as well. Would love if you would give a review. And next week's guest is going to be, well, myself. Let me explain. I'm doing so much travel, so much is going on, going to New York City, San Francisco, and I've had people ask me, say, you should be interviewed on the show. And, maybe someday we'll do that. I'm just on this show, so we could really give my full story if anyone is really interested. However, Mary Swafield, if I'm saying that right, of her podcast is Wedpreneur. I've done several interviews on different podcasts, and that was the most recent one. And so based on people asking me to do something like this, I'm going to go ahead and air her interview of me, which is really fun because it's interesting. I found that really she gave me a chance to sum up some of the biggest threads that I've experienced from my esteemed guests on The Wedding Biz. And so thanks to Mary's questioning process, it was really a cool way for me to kind of bring up some of these threads that I think will be very helpful, they all find interesting. So in any case, we look forward to talking to you when I return. Again, got some great other interviews coming up, and thanks for listening to The Wedding Biz.